Captain Lucas Vance stood in the control room of the Resistance flagship, staring at the map of the star system spread across the holographic display in front of him. The war had raged for years, and the Vyrath were no closer to being defeated. Humanity was on the brink of extinction, their only hope resting on the thin shoulders of their resistance forces. But Vance had always been a fighter. He didn't give up, he didn't back down. For the past few months, things had seemed especially bleak. The Vyrath, an aggressive and technologically superior alien species, had launched a new wave of attacks. They had wiped out whole human colonies, turning once thriving worlds into ghost towns. Vance was considered one of the best minds in the Resistance, a tactician with an uncanny ability to predict enemy movements. Yet, despite all his strategies, they were losing. A soft chime sounded from the doorway behind him. Turning, Vance saw General Alara Zeon, his second-in-command, enter the room. Her face was as grim as ever, the weariness of war etched deep into her features. Alara had been with Vance since the start of the conflict. They had survived countless battles together, and yet she had never once shown any sign of fear. "What's the news?" Vance asked, though he already had a sinking feeling in his gut. "More reports from the front. The Vyrath are launching another offensive," Alara replied, her voice steady but with a hint of concern. "And there's word of an elite Vyrath commander being sent after you." Her name is Rixa. A highly trained assassin, ruthless and cold. Vance's heart sank. The Vyrath had sent their best. He had heard of Rixa. She was notorious for killing not just soldiers, but entire factions with surgical precision. No one was safe from her. And now, she was coming for him. He had been expecting an attack sooner or later, but not one like this. Vrixa wasn't just another soldier, she was a force of nature. "What's the plan?" he asked, his voice tight with determination. "We need to prepare for the worst, but we've fought against odds before, sir. We'll do what we've always done. We'll survive," Alara said, offering him a small smile. Vance gave a slow nod, though inside he wasn't so sure. The Vyrath were more than just enemies. They were a superior force, fast, smart, and deadly. He knew they would stop at nothing to crush the human resistance, and he was the one they wanted most. As the meeting continued, the tension in the room thickened. Vance and his team knew that Vrixa wasn't just another enemy. She wasn't going to attack in the usual way. No, she would plan this out with careful precision, taking her time to ensure that he was eliminated once and for all. And with her reputation, he knew that there would be no escape. Later that night, in the solitude of his quarters, Vance couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As the leader of the resistance, he had faced countless challenges, but the thought of Vrixa coming for him felt different. It wasn't just about survival. It was about something much deeper, something he couldn't put into words. It felt personal. Suddenly, the lights in his room flickered, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. A figure stepped inside, cloaked in shadows. Vance immediately reached for the blaster at his side, but the figure spoke first. "Put it down, Captain. I'm not here to kill you. At least not yet." The voice was smooth, low, and unmistakably alien. Vance froze. He had heard that voice before. It was the voice of Vrixa. "Why are you here?" Vance demanded, though the words felt like they were being dragged out of him. "You were sent to kill me." Vrixa stepped forward into the dim light, her face revealing a cold, calculating expression. She was taller than him, her lean figure draped in dark, battle-worn armor. She held herself with an air of supreme confidence, like someone who had never known fear. Her violet eyes gleamed with an intensity that made Vance's skin crawl. "I was sent to kill you," she confirmed, her voice devoid of emotion. "But things have changed." Vance took a cautious step back. "Changed? What do you mean?" Vrixa's lips curled into something that could almost be called a smile, though it was far from comforting. "I have learned the truth, Captain. Your people, they're not the enemy. Your warlord Zalthor is. He has lied to us all." Vance's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Vrixa's voice dropped to a whisper. "Zalthor is planning to sacrifice his own people to gain power. He's going to betray the Vyrath Empire, and when he does, I'll be the one standing in his way." Vance's mind raced. This wasn't what he had expected. The Vyrath were a ruthless, prideful species. For one of their own commanders to turn on them, especially one as feared as Vrixa, was unheard of. But something about her words felt genuine. He could see the fire in her eyes, the conviction that burned deep within her. She wasn't lying. You want to stop him? Vance asked, his voice low. You want to kill your own warlord? I have no choice, Vrixa replied, her voice steady but laced with emotion. He has betrayed us all. I must stop him before it's too late. Vance lowered his blaster, though he didn't feel safe yet. He couldn't trust her, not completely. But something told him that she wasn't here to kill him. Not today, anyway. Then, what do you want from me? Vance asked, his voice cautious. I need your help, Captain, Vrixa said. Together we can bring down Zalthor. Together we can end this war. But only if you're willing to work with me. The idea seemed impossible. Vance had spent so many years fighting the Vyrath, killing them to protect his people, and yet here she was, an enemy-turned-ally, offering him a chance to stop the true threat to both their species. For a moment Vance stared at her, weighing his options. He had no reason to trust her, but the idea of uniting against a common enemy was too tempting to ignore. Zalthor was a tyrant, a warlord who cared only for his own power. If he was the true threat, then perhaps the enemy of his enemy was the only ally he had left. I'll help you, Vance said at last, though the words tasted foreign on his tongue. But you're going to have to prove you can be trusted. Vrixa nodded solemnly. I understand. But I promise you this. If we succeed, your people will have a future, and the Vyrath will never be the same. With that, Vrixa turned and walked toward the door, but paused before leaving. We'll make our move tomorrow. Be ready. As the door closed behind her, Vance stood in silence, his mind racing. What had he just agreed to? Was this a trap, or was it the beginning of something greater? He didn't know, but he was about to find out. And deep down, something inside him told him that this alliance, however strange, was their only chance at survival. The next day, Captain Lucas Vance stood at the command center of the Resistance flagship, staring at the tactical map that filled the room. The soft hum of machinery and the quiet murmur of officers working around him barely registered in his mind. His thoughts were elsewhere, still lingering on the encounter with Vrixa the night before. The alien commander, one of the most feared soldiers in the Vyrath army, had come to him, not to kill, but to form an alliance. It seemed impossible. But as he stood there, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was his only chance. Zalthor, the Vyrath warlord, was more dangerous than anything Vance had faced before. If what Vrixa had said was true, if Zalthor was planning to betray his own people, then humanity might have a chance to end the war. Vance had fought the Vyrath for years, and his people had suffered greatly. The Vyrath had wiped out colonies, destroyed cities, and brought humanity to the brink of extinction. He had lost friends, comrades, and countless civilians, and yet here he was, standing with one of their own. His mind flashed back to Vrixa. She had walked into his room, calm and collected, and had revealed the truth about her warlord. The Vyrath commander had known her duty, had been trained for this mission, but something had changed inside her. What had driven her to turn on Zalthor? What had made her come to him instead of fulfilling her mission to kill him? Vance turned away from the map, pacing the room, his hands clenched into fists. The Vyrath were ruthless, and Vrixa was no exception. She had killed countless enemies, and her reputation had spread across the galaxy. But now, here she was, offering to work together. Could he trust her? Could he believe that she wasn't just playing him to further her own goals? Captain Vance? Alara's voice broke through his thoughts. He looked up to see her standing in the doorway, her face unreadable. What is it, General? Vance asked, his voice tight. We've received word from the front lines. The Vyrath are mobilizing their forces. There's a new offensive coming. Vance nodded. He had expected this. The Vyrath weren't going to sit back and let one of their commanders betray them. Zalthor would retaliate, and if Vrixa was right, he would do so with even more force than before. What about Vrixa? Alara asked cautiously. Have you made any progress in your negotiations with her? Vance paused, then sighed. We're not exactly negotiating. She's offered us an alliance. She wants to stop Zalthor, but we don't know if we can trust her. Alara frowned. She's one of them, Lucas. How can you trust her? Vance turned to face his second-in-command. I don't know. But if what she says is true, we don't have a choice. We can't keep fighting the Vyrath without knowing who the real enemy is. Alara's gaze hardened. You're putting a lot of faith in her. Vance didn't respond right away. Instead, he walked over to the holographic display again, his fingers running over the map. The Vyrath were massing their forces in several key locations. He didn't know how much time they had before the full-scale attack began. We need to move quickly, Vance said, his voice firm. We can't wait for this to unfold. I'll meet with her again tonight. We need to plan our next move. Alara nodded. I'll prepare the team. We'll be ready. That evening, Vance met Vrixa in a secluded room aboard the ship. He was nervous, though he wouldn't admit it to anyone else.
He had no idea what to expect from her, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off.
But there was no time for second-guessing now. The war was at their doorstep, and they needed to act. Vrixa was already there, waiting. She stood near the window, her back to him, her dark armor blending with the shadows. Her violet eyes glowed faintly in the dim light as she turned to face him. You came, she said, her voice steady, as though this was just another meeting in a long list of business. I said I would, Vance replied, his tone flat. He crossed the room and stood a few feet away from her, keeping his distance. He wasn't sure if he was ready to trust her fully, but he had no choice. Vrixa studied him for a long moment, her gaze piercing. Have you decided? Vance frowned. Decided what? If you will work with me, she replied, her tone surprisingly calm. If you will help me take down Zalthor. Vance hesitated. He wasn't sure he was ready to take that leap, but he knew that every moment they waited, Zalthor's forces grew stronger. If Vrixa was telling the truth, then the Vyrath were about to change. The balance of power was shifting, and humanity needed to act now. I'll help you, Vance said finally, his voice low, but we do this my way. We don't trust anyone else. Not yet. Vrixa nodded. Agreed. We can't trust the Vyrath, not anymore. Zalthor's plans will tear apart the very foundation of our people. I have to stop him, or there will be nothing left. Vance's eyes narrowed. Tell me more. What's his plan? Vrixa's expression darkened. Zalthor has allied himself with the Skirax, a dangerous species we once considered allies. They have technology that could destroy entire planets. Zalthor intends to use this weapon to wipe out the Vyrath and take control of the entire galaxy. He doesn't care about the consequences. He doesn't care about his own people. Vance's blood ran cold. The Skirax were a powerful warlike species, known for their brutal tactics and devastating weapons. If Zalthor had made a deal with them, it meant the Vyrath were in more danger than anyone had realized. I can't let him do this, Vrixa said, her voice low and filled with anger. I've killed for him, followed his orders for years, but no more. If I have to bring down my entire people to stop him, I will. Vance saw the fire in her eyes. She wasn't lying. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was about saving her people, and perhaps saving humanity along with them. How do we stop him? Vance asked, his voice steady. Vrixa's lips curled into a grim smile. We need to infiltrate his stronghold. His personal fleet is docked on the planet Zar-Vor, a heavily fortified world. But there's a weakness, his security. If we can break in, we can disable his weapon before it's too late. Vance didn't hesitate. Then let's do it. Vrixa nodded. We'll need a team, and we'll need to move fast. Zalthor won't wait long before he launches his attack. The two of them began to plan the mission. Vance knew it wouldn't be easy, but this was their chance. The only chance they had. If they could take down Zalthor, if they could stop his plans, the war might finally come to an end. Later that night, Vance gathered his best officers in the war room. Alara, as always, was at his side, her expression focused and determined. Vance outlined the plan, telling them everything he knew about Zalthor and the threat he posed. There were no secrets now, no more hiding. The truth had come out and they had to act. We can't afford any mistakes, Vance said. Zalthor is counting on us to fail, but we won't. As the team prepared to move out, Vance couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. He wasn't sure how things would unfold, or what role Vrixa would play in all of this, but he knew one thing. The fate of humanity, and the fate of the Vyrath, rested in their hands. The plan to infiltrate Zar-Vor, Zalthor's fortress world, was set into motion. Captain Lucas Vance and Vrixa, the alien commander who had once been sent to kill him, now stood together as unlikely allies. The Resistance had gathered their best operatives for the mission, and every officer knew the stakes were high. If they failed, humanity's survival would be in jeopardy. Vance stood on the bridge of the flagship, looking out at the stars. The ship was preparing for departure, and every crew member was working hard to make sure the mission would succeed. Alara, his second-in-command, moved swiftly from one officer to another, ensuring that everything was in place. The tension in the room was palpable. This mission wasn't just about taking down Zalthor. It was about securing a future for both humanity and the Vyrath, two species that had been locked in a brutal war for far too long. Vrixa had kept to herself for most of the day, silent and focused. She was a trained soldier, and the gravity of what they were about to do weighed heavily on her. Her people would never forgive her for killing their warlord, but she didn't care. Zalthor's betrayal was too great. The Vyrath had to be saved from him. As the ship moved through space, Vance couldn't help but wonder about Vrixa's true intentions. She had killed her warlord, turned on her people, and now she was working with humanity. It didn't make sense, but there was something about her that he couldn't ignore. He could see the determination in her eyes. She wasn't just a warrior. She was a person who had made a choice to do what was right, even if it meant turning her back on everything she had once known. Vance approached her as she stood by the observation window, watching the stars drift by. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low. Vrixa turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "I've killed for him," she said quietly, her voice strained. "I followed his orders, executed his enemies, and now I have to stop him. I have to stop everything he's planned." Vance nodded. He didn't need to ask for details. He knew what she meant. Zalthor's betrayal wasn't just about power. It was about destroying entire species, wiping out innocent lives. She had been a part of that, but now she was fighting against it, and for that, Vance respected her. "You're doing the right thing," Vance said. No one else could have stopped him. No one else could have killed Zalthor and lived to tell about it. Vrixa's eyes softened for a moment, but only for a moment. She quickly turned away, hiding her emotions behind the cold facade she had built over years of war. "I don't need praise," she replied flatly. "I need results. And I need to destroy Zalthor's weapon before it's too late." Vance didn't press her. He understood. This wasn't about praise or gratitude. It was about survival. The fate of both humanity and the Vyrath rested on their ability to stop Zalthor and his plans. The journey to Zarvor was long, but it was a necessary one. Every moment was crucial. As the flagship entered the orbit of the planet, the crew was ready for what was coming. Vance and Vrixa stood at the forefront of the mission, but they knew that success depended on the teamwork of every single person aboard the ship. The Resistance's strike force, a small but elite team, prepared to board the dropships. Vance looked over the team, making sure everyone was equipped and ready. Alara was by his side, her gaze sharp and focused as always. Her loyalty to him had never wavered, even in the face of their most dangerous battles. Vance trusted her with his life, and he knew she felt the same way. "You ready?" Alara asked, her voice steady despite the weight of the mission ahead. "As ready as we'll ever be," Vance replied. He looked toward Vrixa, who stood a few paces away, her expression unreadable as usual. Vrixa didn't answer, but her eyes met his for a brief moment. There was a flicker of something. Regret? Hope? He couldn't tell. It's hard to read her. She had always been a soldier, but now she was something more. A traitor to her people, but a hero in her own right. "We're going in," Vance said, taking a deep breath. "Stick to the plan, and remember, we're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting for something bigger. We're fighting for a future, for both of our people." The dropships launched, cutting through the atmosphere of Zarvor. The planet below was a cold, industrial world, a fortress that seemed almost impenetrable. Vance's heart pounded in his chest. Every step they took would bring them closer to Zalthor's weapon, and closer to the final confrontation that would determine the fate of the galaxy. When the team touched down on the surface, the atmosphere was tense. They moved quickly, sticking to the shadows, using the terrain to their advantage. Zarvor was a dangerous world, filled with security measures designed to keep intruders out. But Vance and his team had trained for this moment. They had done their homework, studied every weakness, and now it was time to strike. Vrixa led the way, her movements swift and sure. She knew this world better than anyone else, and her expertise was invaluable. As they made their way deeper into the heart of the fortress, Vance couldn't help but admire her. She was a force of nature, a woman who had turned against everything she had ever known to fight for what was right. Their first obstacle came quickly. The first wave of security guards appeared, armed and ready to defend the fortress. Without a word, Vrixa moved like lightning, taking out the first two guards with quick, efficient strikes. Vance and Alara followed suit, neutralizing the remaining guards before they had a chance to react. They continued on, every step taking them closer to their goal. The tension was thick, but Vance couldn't afford to think about the dangers. They had a mission to complete, and they couldn't afford to fail. Finally, they reached the control room, the heart of Zalthor's weapon. Vance could feel his pulse quicken. The room was heavily guarded, but they had come this far. There was no turning back now. "We're close," Vance said, his voice steady despite the nerves that threatened to break through. "Let's finish this." Vixa nodded. "Stay alert. Zalthor will be watching." They breached the door, and chaos erupted. The guards inside were well trained, but they were no match for the Resistance's strike force. Vance and Vixa moved together, clearing the room with precision and speed. Alara and the others kept their backs covered, ensuring that no one was left behind. At the center of the room stood a massive control panel, linked to a device that looked like something out of a nightmare. It was a weapon that could wipe out entire worlds, a doomsday device with the power to destroy everything in its path. Vance's heart raced as he realized just how close they were to stopping Zalthor's plan. Vixa moved to the control panel, her fingers flying over the buttons. "I need a few more seconds," she said, her voice calm despite the urgency of the situation. The door behind them slammed open and Zalthor's elite guards charged in. The room erupted into gunfire. Vance's team fought back fiercely, but they were outnumbered. The fight seemed endless, but Vance couldn't afford to focus on that. "Vixa!" he shouted. "Hurry!" Vrixa's fingers moved faster. She was almost there. But then something unexpected happened. Zalthor himself appeared at the entrance to the room, his dark figure looming in the doorway. "You think you can stop me?" Zalthor's voice echoed through the chamber. "You're too late." Vance stood tall, his weapon raised. "We're just getting started. The final confrontation was at hand, and there was no turning back now." Vance, Vixa, and the team had come too far to fail. They had to stop Zalthor, no matter the cost. The room was filled with chaos. The air was thick with smoke, and the sound of gunfire echoed off the walls. Vance's heart pounded in his chest as he watched Zalthor step into the control room, his towering form filling the doorway. The Warlord's cold eyes locked onto Vance, a cruel smirk spreading across his face. "You think you can stop me?" Zalthor's voice was low and menacing, the tone filled with arrogance. "I have already won." Vance didn't hesitate. His weapon was ready, and the moment Zalthor stepped into the room, Vance fired. But the blast missed, and before he could take another shot, Zalthor's guards opened fire. Vance ducked behind a large control panel, the blasts whizzing past him. He could feel the heat of the energy blasts as they hit the wall beside him. Alara and the rest of the team fought fiercely, returning fire to protect their commander, but Vance knew the odds were stacked against them. They were outnumbered and outgunned. Zalthor's elite soldiers were among the best, and the team was spread thin. "Vixa!" Vance shouted over the gunfire. "How much longer?" Vixa, standing at the control panel, was working quickly, her fingers moving in a blur across the controls. Her face was set in a mask of concentration, but Vance could see the tension in her jaw. She was pushing herself to the limit. "I'm almost there," she called back, not looking up from the panel. "Just cover me for a few more seconds." Vance could see the determination in her eyes. She wasn't just trying to stop Zalthor's weapon, she was fighting for her own redemption. For years she had been a tool in Zalthor's hands, killing at his command. Now she was determined to end his reign and save both her people and humanity. Zalthor's voice cut through the noise. "You are all fools," he said, stepping forward. "You think you can stop me? My power is absolute. I have the scare axe at my side. The galaxy will bow to me." Vance could feel the anger building inside him. Zalthor had already caused so much pain and destruction. He had destroyed entire worlds, wiped out families, and led his people down a path of betrayal. Now the Warlord stood there taunting them, thinking he was untouchable, but Vance knew one thing for sure. Zalthor was not going to win this battle. Vance peeked around the corner of the control panel and fired another shot at one of Zalthor's guards, taking him down. He then turned back to Vixa. "How much longer, Vixa?" "I'm almost there," she repeated, her voice tight with frustration. "Just a few more seconds." Vance knew that every second counted. If they didn't stop Zalthor's weapon, the galaxy would be plunged into an even darker war. The Vyrath would be destroyed, and humanity would be nothing more than a memory. He couldn't let that happen. Not now, not after everything they had fought for. The sound of footsteps echoed through the room, and Vance turned to see Zalthor's imposing figure moving toward them. He had stopped for a moment, watching the chaos unfold, but now he was advancing. He raised his hand, signaling for his soldiers to move in. "You think you can change anything?" Zalthor spat. "You're just a small part of a dying species. The Vyrath are destined to rule. The Skirax are my allies, and together we will bring the galaxy under our control." Vance's pulse quickened. Zalthor was too close now. They needed to finish this, or it would all be for nothing. "Vixa!" he shouted. "Now!" Vrixa's hands flew over the controls, and with a final push, she entered the last code. The massive weapon in the center of the room began to power down. There was a loud hum as the system deactivated and the energy in the room seemed to shift. The weapon was no longer a threat. But Zalthor wasn't finished. He lunged forward, his massive form crashing into Vance. The two of them tumbled to the floor, grappling with each other. Zalthor's strength was overwhelming, but Vance wasn't going to back down. He had faced worse. He had faced death before, and he would face it again if it meant stopping this monster. With a burst of energy, Vance pushed Zalthor off of him, rolling to his feet. Zalthor recovered quickly, but Vance was ready. He fired his blaster at the Warlord, but Zalthor deflected the shot with ease. "You cannot defeat me, Captain," Zalthor growled, his eyes filled with fury. "I am the future of the Vyrath. I am the galaxy's master." Vance stood tall, his face set in determination. "Not today," he said. "Your reign ends here." Vrixa was already moving toward them, her weapon drawn. She didn't hesitate. With a swift movement, she aimed her blaster and fired. The shot struck Zalthor in the chest, sending him crashing to the floor. Zalthor looked up, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. He gasped for breath, but it was too late. The Warlord was done. "No, this can't be." Zalthor's voice was weak, filled with disbelief. "You betrayed me." Vrixa stood over him, her face a mask of cold resolve. "You betrayed us first." The room fell silent. Zalthor's body lay motionless on the floor, and for a moment, no one moved. It was over. The Warlord who had caused so much destruction, who had led his people to the brink of ruin, was dead. And in his place there was a chance for a new future. Vance turned to Vrixa, his gaze meeting hers. He didn't need to say anything. They had done it. Together they had stopped Zalthor, and together they had saved both their people. It wasn't just a victory for humanity, it was a victory for the Vyrath as well. Alara stepped forward, her eyes filled with relief. "It's over," she said quietly. "We did it." Vance nodded, his mind still racing. They had won, but the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, and there would be those who would oppose the change. But for the first time in a long time, Vance felt hope. They had stopped the weapon. They had ended the war, and now they had to rebuild. Vrixa lowered her weapon and turned to face him. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something in her eyes, something that hadn't been there before. A spark of something more than just a soldier's resolve. A hint of peace, perhaps, or maybe redemption. "We did it," she said softly. "I never thought I'd get to say that." Vance smiled, though the weight of everything they had been through still lingered. "We did. Together." For a moment they stood there in silence, surrounded by the wreckage of the battle. The Warlord was dead, and the galaxy would never be the same. But in that moment, standing side by side with an enemy-turned ally, Vance realized that it wasn't just about winning the war, it was about choosing to fight for something better. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, Vance felt ready to face it. He wasn't alone. They weren't alone. And maybe, just maybe, they had the chance to build something new. Together.